Hey everyone, so today I'm really happy to have Sophia Barlow, an osteopath in the UK, to come talk to us about the good, the bad, and the ugly of working from home. Welcome, Sophia, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, well, it is really lovely to be here. And as you remember, like when we first started chatting, we were talking sort of all about back pain and, why it's so important. And yeah, so just, I guess, sort of just to introduce myself a little bit, shall I just tell you a little bit about my journey and how I got here?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so yeah, I have been an osteopath for 12 years. And I actually studied later in life. So before that, I was actually a recruitment consultant, and I worked sort of in London, and then I worked overseas in Sydney, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, I just had that moment. I was like, I just want to use my brain a little bit more, and just sound a little bit cheesy, but I was like, I do want to help people, and I did really enjoy helping people find jobs, but I guess I just wanted something different and
Mm,
something, that was a bit more flexible in terms of lifestyle. And at the time, I mean, luckily, sort of flexi working's really coming through now, isn't it? And we'll
yeah.
obviously get on and talk about working from home and that kind of thing. But at the time, it was much more structured. And I was like, at some point, I will maybe want to start thinking about sort of having a family and not doing this 9 to 5. So one way and another, I decided on osteopathy, and then I did that. So this study is 4 years full time or 5 years kind of part time, or some of it's part time. And I did that. I actually had my first child while I was studying, and then yeah, graduated 12 years ago, and I just absolutely love it. And I kind of just got to a place where I just I say the same things a lot to my patients. So I see hundreds, thousands of patients every year, and I do end up saying the same kinds of things. And I was just like, you know what, everyone needs to know these things. So I guess that's why I'm going out there a little bit at the moment, and yeah, just talking to people about how they can avoid back pain in the first instance, and all sorts of other pain, and just get to know their bodies a little bit better. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
So, of all the areas of possible physical pains, why did you want to particularly talk to us about back pain today?
Yeah, so just kind of, I guess, dipping my toe in the corporate world to begin with. I guess that's probably the best place to start, really, to give you an idea about the kind of the the impact of back pain is that it's actually the second most common reason that an employee will take a day off work. So the first reason, so that's the Office of National Statistics data, so that's like big data. Um, so yeah, the first reason is common cold, minor illness, and then yeah, the second reason is back pain. The third reason is other, which is, yeah, it's quite a mixed bag, that group. And then the fourth is mental health. So there's a lot in the media, and rightly so, about mental health. And we will touch a little bit on that as well, because of course our physical selves and our mental health are very much interlinked. But yeah, back pain has definitely been kind of like taking a back seat a little bit, and actually it's really important. And of course, with people working from home at the moment, it's something that people are becoming, a bit more interested in. So yeah, I tend to get the most patients with back pain. So that's partly it. And of course, that does extrapolate into yeah, the working world.
So, a lot of us are working from home now. Can you tell us what the best setup is?
Basically, it's nothing that you wouldn't know really a lot of the time with desk setup. Quite often you get given some guidelines from work, but I think sometimes people do overcomplicate it a little bit. So it's kind of basically it's around 90 degrees at the arm here, and then you've got your keyboard set up
Hmm.
here. And what you need to have is your computer sort of in your screen in your eye line, so that you're not so that when you're standing up kind of reasonably straight, you're literally kind of looking at the screen. So what you don't want is a screen where you're having to tilt your head up, which is a lot less common. The thing that I see more is actually when the screen is down,
Hmm.
and so you're kind of looking down towards the screen, as you would do, for example, if you're on your phone or something like that, and you end up sort of having a little bit of protracted posture. So what you want is to have your screen sort of in eye line. In terms of your chair, actually support is really important. So people quite often talk to me about, a chair that can twist around.
Yeah.
And that's basically so that you don't have to rotate your body as much. You're not getting quite so much kind of rotation, sort of torsion. The chair kind of like does it for you. What I would say about that is, yes, that is really handy if you've got a double screen setup, which is, I guess maybe historically it might have been more sort of office space if you had that, but more and more I'm seeing people at home with 2 screens. So that can be super helpful if you've got 2 screens. But what I would say is, don't have a swingy chair at the expense of having a supportive chair, because actually if your muscles can't kind of relax a little bit as you're sitting, you will end up kind of like clenching your buttocks, kind of hanging on. And actually that can put a little bit of strain through your low back. So really the most important thing in terms of seat is actually to have something that's quite nice and supportive and feels quite firm. So to be honest, quite often like a good solid, maybe old fashioned dining chair can be just as good as a really expensive office chair. So yeah, that's something to kind of think about.
When I was still working at the office, we had desks that can be mechanically raised to act as a standing desk. Are those really better for us?
They're good in that anything that gets you moving basically at work is a good thing. So anything that might make you change, maybe from sort of standing to sitting. And of course, some people use like you can kind of almost like go on like a treadmill while you're working and stuff. And, people trying to kind of literally multitask with their bodies, which is fine. That can work for some people. But what I would say, I'm going to come on now a little bit to about posture at your desk and kind of why it goes wrong. If it's the same thing really for when you're sitting. So, I mentioned about if you've got the screen down here. Now, obviously, if you've got your laptop, then the screen is going to be here. So you start off like this, but actually what also happens that you end up scooping like this. You're kind of basically, so for the people that aren't watching this on video, what I'm doing is I'm basically slumping forward a bit. And the thing is that because your arms obviously come out of your shoulders rather than coming out here like your ears, you don't need the screen right here in front of you and then your keyboard here. You need a space between them, of course, because you need to kind of here, don't you? And if you squish the thing that you're working on to here, you end up having to sort of squish yourself. So really important to have a separate keyboard. So if you're going to invest in something, way before you consider getting a stand-up desk, I would literally just get a cheap plug-in keyboard into your laptop, separate keyboard, so that you can have that distance between your head and your hands. And getting onto stand-up desks, that's what's really important, because quite often, and honestly, it does grate me a little bit because sometimes I see them, on LinkedIn and stuff. There'll be photos like advertisements for a stand-up desk, and it'll be someone working on a laptop. And of course, just because you've got a stand-up desk doesn't mean you don't still need that distance between. And you can get, stuff that sort of goes on the desk, but you still need that same distance from where you're looking at the screen, obviously, to where you've got your hands kind of like in a neutral position. So that is a reason, if you like, for poor posture, is not having that distance. But just to sort of step into other reasons, like actually what's happening physically, because you can have the perfect setup, right? You can have the screen in the perfect place, you can have the keyboard in the perfect place, good desk, nice, solid, supportive chair. And, you can still, by the end of the day, feel like, oh my goodness, my shoulders are killing me. I've got this chronic headache. So, what actually is going wrong? People quite often say, oh, it's my posture, which is bad. But just to pick that apart a little bit. So what happens? Everyone sits down really nicely when they sit down at their desk. They're like, oh, here I am. And when patients show me in the clinic, I'm sort of like, so how do you sit at your desk? They always sit here like perfectly. But actually, and we all do it. What happens over time is that actually your abs fold. So the main kind of muscle group, if you like, that is holding you upright and secure while you're working is kind of like your abdominal muscles and your back muscles kind of working together, but particularly your abs, right? So with the best will in the world, they are just not strong enough to literally hold your whole body weight, or a lot of your body weight, good chunk of your body weight, literally upright like this, for very long. So yeah, sure, half an hour, but after half an hour, you're going to find that you are kind of bending forward like this, arms like this, sometimes like a leg up, or you can see I've got my jeans on, like leg up on the desk. You know, people will literally do anything, and that's when people kind of like, they cross their legs, they're trying to get comfy, and people will be like, oh no, I'm doing this really naughty thing, I'm crossing my legs all the time at the desk. And like, that might be a habit, but more often it's because literally that muscle group, it can't do it anymore. And you know, people are kind of, some people kind of like something like this. So the most important thing really is to get up and have a walk around, and we'll come on later to, I think you wanted me to talk about my 3 top tips. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and also I think sometimes, you know, even if you're the fittest athlete, right, like you said, our ab muscles are not designed to be, you know, clenched for 8 hours straight while we're working. And I do find that sometimes people then, in an attempt to sit very straight, they're actually then using their lower back to hold themselves. And then you start kind of pushing your body forward, and then people get lower back pain as well.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and in my own experience, it's almost like it extends to your traps, you know, your upper back muscles, all of that becomes really strained because you're trying so hard to maintain this, you know, sitting upright posture. Whereas in my opinion, if you got a good back cushion, you know, like those lumbar support cushions, you can actually, you know, you're not really leaning back in a very low angle, but you're letting the support help you a little bit to maintain that posture instead of just, you know, being in the air essentially by yourself.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And actually, some of the lumbar support cushions can kind of keep you a little bit more comfortable for a bit longer. But it is exactly that. I mean, it's the whole sort of Pilates idea, isn't it? So a lot of people have sort of done Pilates where they're talking about sort of like core support. And the idea is that you've got that lovely, strong framework. And that's why I talk a lot about, you know, with just having like a really solid chair. So you've got your feet on the ground, you've got a good solid support there, and then you've got your strong abs there. And that really is the support structure for your shoulders to sit comfortably on top. And really, you should not be feeling like you kind of have to hang on. And you're absolutely right in terms of that kind of like musculoskeletal chain working it all its way up. So I'm going to then put on top of it. So, and then we can pick apart the sort of biomechanics of like the whole chain.
I'm sure you would have seen loads of clients come in with different aches and pains caused by bad habits rather than injuries. Can you maybe tell us some of your least favorite ones?
Quite often people then, they've been at their desk for ages, they're already stooping over a bit. They're clenching their jaws really hard because they're concentrating. So sometimes, you know, that is to do with stress, that can be linked to stress. But quite often, you know, you're just concentrating and people don't even realize they're doing it. And basically, then what happens is you've got your tight jaw, and then you've got your sternocleidomastoid muscle, which basically attacks sort of from the jaw down here. And then you've got your scalene muscles, which attach sort of to the neck and to the upper ribs. They're kind of hanging on. So you've got almost like a vice situation happening. And then in your mid neck, you've probably just got a few joints that actually are functioning. But the rest of it is pretty much locked. And these are the patients that come and see me who actually, those few joints in the mid neck have kind of given up the ghost. They're like, you know what, we just can't do anymore because everything else is fixed. And I turn to the left or to the right and pick something up and my neck went. It's those patients who have been kind of, you know, just habitually tightening the jaw, keeping those shoulders super tight. So it's what I sometimes say to my patients, wearing their shoulder earrings. So just sort of picking that apart. And then, of course, that you've got that thoracic spine lock. So you've got your sort of upper mid back kind of hunched over, if you like, because it's kind of trying to sort of hold you up, as you said, because the abs have kind of given up a little bit. So you've got this whole kind of really rigid space. And actually the body's meant to be moving, isn't it? And of course the joints need to move comfortably. And they've all got a tiny little job to do. So all those tiny little facet joints coming, which are basically the joints that kind of limit movement and help with movement, from the neck through the mid back into the low back. They kind of they all do each little vertebral kind of segment, each has a little job to do. And actually, if some of those are taken out of the system, then of course you do end up getting injuries. And if these things sort of happen chronically, then of course, it's just more and more likely to get injured, more and more likely to kind of have chronic pain. And of course, it's then harder to pick apart. So we sort of get into like, that's the worst case scenario. Just to layer it on, one more thing is that actually, if you're stressed at work, your tissue healing isn't as good. So what, you think about the sort of corticosteroids washing around your body when you're stressed. So cortisol kind of puts a little bit of a dampener on tissue healing because it wants to reduce inflammation. It wants your body's resources doing other things. So over time, your tissue healing's kind of not so good either. So it's almost like and people sort of come in, they're like, I don't know what went wrong. I went to twist and do some gardening or this, that, and the other, and suddenly my neck, I've got no idea why. But of course, it's this whole build up, this whole kind of picture. And I am seeing it more and more with necks, and people are saying, I've just, on the one hand, it's great working from home. And I think when you kind of utilize it well, I think it's just fantastic for all sorts of different reasons. But I think you can also get a little bit locked into a project. You haven't got other, as many kind of external things happening. So you can end up just like this for ages and ages. So yeah, all those things, does create a little bit of a perfect storm. So should we start picking it apart a little bit now? And I'll sort of say what I think is a good thing to do.
Yeah, and I think maybe a couple of things that popped in my mind is, I've been reading how, if we have our phones with us, and nobody looks at their phone like this, right? You're always kind of head down a little bit. And this angle where you're holding your neck for, sometimes quite a long period of time can also be very bad for you. And this is, I guess, even more severe than the angle of perhaps just using a laptop where you're hunching over. And when using your phone, this is actually a lot of weight on our necks, isn't it? So it's a constant.
There's some really good little sort of like visual diagrams you can see about that online. So of course you've got that slightly increased flexion down, and the area that it hits is called particularly it's your CT joint, so it's your cervicothoracic sort of level, which is basically what we call like a hinge point. So it's where your neck kind of, in your neck you've got like a curve like this, so what we call like a lordosis, and then you come gradually into the thorax, which is your upper mid back, and that's the kyphosis. And your CT junction is that junction there, and it's the kind of bobbly bit. If you can kind of quite often feel it at right at the top of your back, right at the base of your neck, and you just get so much loading onto that CT when you're looking down at your screen. And there's various different sort of theories of exactly how many extra kilograms of weight you're kind of, which is all kind of, but it's true essentially is that you are getting a lot of loading there. And of course, that is absolutely fine as long as you're not doing it sort of all day. But if you're doing it a lot of the time, then of course these things build up. And I mean, it's like, I see quite a lot of teens at the moment with, slightly different, but they're looking at screens, they're looking at their computer screens kind of in the evening, having fun, gaming and stuff. But, I'm seeing a lot more repetitive strains in forearms. And also, I mean, not just teens, but I think also from texting and being on the phone all the time. So I'm seeing a lot of kind of injuries of what we sort of classically call like tennis elbow into your wrist extensors here, because you're kind of basically just using your wrist the whole time working.
So also, the way we sit at our desks, with our arms in front of us typing, for people who are watching the video version of this, quite often you end up kind of doing this curl, with your shoulders going forward. And essentially you're just in a hunched position for an extended period of time. And that's why people get a lot of pain in this area, right behind your shoulder blades.
That's absolutely right. So you'll get that kind of pull across your basically like your sort of your from your deltoid and like your upper traps here, you'll get that pull across. but it's just, I guess it's kind of from what we were saying about that kind of stooping forward. What also happens over time is actually your pecs, because your sort of long pec attaches here into the shoulder, and then your short pec attaches here, sort of in the coracoid process, which is, so basically what happens is they shorten over time because they're more used to being here, so a little bit what we call like a protracted posture. And of course then it's not just when you're at your desk, because it is when you stand up, you're just walking around and you are getting a little bit more hunched over, and it's like, well, you know what, that's not the end of the world because bodies are all different, and that's absolutely fine as long as your body can compensate. It doesn't really matter at all. But if it is starting to cause pain, these kind of little loops can start and get worse and worse and worse. And I won't go into all the various things you can get, but you can get different pain for all sorts of different reasons, because you've got some really important nerve bundles here, basically right at the front of the shoulder here. So you then start to get the symptoms into the arms, and as I've mentioned, that kind of biomechanical change to the neck. It all adds up basically. And so you can get, I won't go into kind of tiny complex detail, because although I'd enjoy it, but the thing is really, and I think that's the point as well, is that yes, it is very complicated. There's all kinds of super interesting, biomechanics going on, but actually the way to alleviate it is quite straightforward and simple. And I think, that's really worth saying, because there are loads of simple things that you can do to kind of stop that happening. And so, I guess what I've talked about in the first instance is the desk setup and all that kind of, and that's super important. So it's like the equipment you've got, and then it's how you're interacting with the equipment. So when I was talking about sort of maybe not clenching your jaw, but also not spending too much time in this perfect desk setup situation, because however perfect it is, your bodies need to move, and that's that's just really worth remembering. So every half. Yeah, sorry,
I was going to say, I think it's quite important for people to understand how our bodies are actually structured. So for everything that happens in the front, the anterior, chamber of our bodies, we have the posterior chamber. And I think, when people talk about having lower back pain or even upper back pain, quite often it is caused by muscle imbalance, just because we don't usually tend to think about, okay, if I'm typing, then what are all the things in my body that are being used?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. So it's even just with muscle groups, you've got an agonist and antagonist. There's always the other side to consider, whether that's sort of AP, so anterior-posterior, or working laterally, sort of one side to the other kind of thing. So that's absolutely right. It is, and I mean, to sort of dive in a bit, I think it does just reflect the fact that everything is connected. So from a kind of anatomical point of view, how all your joints are connected, how your muscles are connected, that's one thing. But also, when you're looking at the function of the body, so like the physiology of what's going on, everything again is interacting. And so what we just sort of touched on, with cortisol and stress, and then tissue healing not being quite as good, and of course if you've got a bit of pain, then structurally your body does adapt slightly, and then that can cause it's all connected. I think I think the podcast that you're doing here is, I just think it's really, really valuable, because I think there's a lot of interest in health and well-being at the moment. And I think that for whatever reason, it's almost as if the knowledge that health experts have, maybe it's because I'm a sort of mature student, but I just don't know. It's almost like there's a black box, isn't there, of your body, and for whatever reason, health professionals, I mean, to be honest, it's just they don't really have time. I mean, which GP has time to sit down? I bet they'd love to sit down for half an hour and talk about the biomechanics of like plantar fasciitis or Achilles tendonitis or anything else, whatever, further up the body. But they haven't got time to do it. And I think there is a real hunger to take control a little bit over their health with knowledge, so that they can just work a bit more efficiently, not be in pain. And yeah, there's a lot of people doing really great stuff in this space. Ranjan Chatterjee's he's done some really brilliant stuff, kind of trying to simplify a lot of the stuff that we deal with sort of day in, day out, and just trying to kind of, just give that in tangible ways to people. And that's basically what I do in the clinic every day. Is, the way I run my clinic is that I just want to see people as little as possible, and I want to give them a toolkit that they can have and use, so that they can go out and then, they tell their family and friends to come and see me, and that's the way it works. So I think it's a super valuable podcast, actually. And I think you're going to, obviously you focus a lot on nutrition, and it's so important. Really important. So that was going to be, sorry, go on.
Even with physical pain, with nutrition, there's an increasingly popular trend of, let's try not to have to deal with sickness when it happens, but let's prevent it. And I think that almost extends into physical problems as well, where, of course, we have people like yourself who are osteopaths, we've got physical therapists, we've got all of these great people who try to help us when we get injured and we are in pain. But I think people should try to shift, instead of brushing off pain, we shouldn't be expecting to feel pain every day. That's not a normal thing. And instead of reaching for the over-the-counter painkiller, or using, a hot water bottle, using patches, maybe we should try to really figure out, why am I getting this pain every day? Because the human body, unless you have pre-existing conditions and neurological problems, which is causing you constant pain, a normal, healthy body, I just don't think we should accept pain as something we feel every day.
Yeah. I mean, just to sort of touch on that a little bit. So there's a lot in there that I agree with. What I would say in the first instance, so what I do and kind of what we're trained to do, is in the first instance look out for red flags. And I think that is part of it. So, I mean, basically, the fact is that most people come into me really concerned, and they're kind of like, oh, this is the end. I'm not going to be able to do whatever it is I've been enjoying because my knees have just given up now. All this. So normally they come in more concerned than they need to be. But I guess my job as a health professional, and I think this is also super important, is that you have to start it at first base. And first base is basically red flags in our job. So first base is, new pain that you haven't experienced before, symptoms, so in what I do, that don't correlate to just a straightforward musculoskeletal presentation. And of course, so people will be looking at this podcast, and I would say to everybody that if you have got any new symptoms that you're concerned about, if you've got any increasing symptoms that you're concerned about, if you've got a change in symptoms that you've had before, be like, oh, that's just a bit different. And basically, if you have just got that feeling of, it's just not quite right, I don't know what it is. These are the things that patients say to me, even though I like to think I do a very thorough case history. Sometimes when they're leaving, they say, oh, I didn't want to trouble the doctor, but, and they'll say to me X, Y, Z. And these are the things, in the first instance, you need to go and see your GP about. So we're very lucky in the UK in that everyone has got access. You pay taxes, go and ask your GP. At the moment, people, it's a real concern at the moment because people are not accessing their GP quite as readily as they maybe would do because of COVID. So they are kind of holding back a little bit, and that's a concern. And also, where we would normally be screening a lot of patients. So, it's not, but okay, sometimes I do have to refer people back into the GP, or to the GP in the first instance, or to A&E if necessary. And we haven't been working quite as much in lockdown. So there's kind of a whole tier of people who would normally be screening who aren't screening. So you are absolutely right in the sense that, people need to know a bit more about their bodies and stuff. But what I wouldn't want is that people are like, right, I'm just going to work out what's going on myself, because there's enormous, GPs are really good at doing that stuff in the first instance, and they're just experienced, and that's what they're there for. They're basically a safety net. For the other 95% of what's going on, then we just need to dive in and look after ourselves, to a massive extent. Really, there's an enormous amount you can do yourself, as I was saying, and obviously you're a big advocate of. But I would say always in the first instance, safety first.
So. I was going to add to that, never go on webmd.com. Just don't try to self-diagnose through Google. Just don't do it, because it's always, I think it's rarely the correct diagnosis. And given that, you're looking at a static website, not a, qualified person who can ask you follow-up questions and, physically see what's going on, I just think that's always a bad idea to try to self-diagnose.
Yeah, we're totally on the same page there. But that is not to say that once you've had your diagnosis and everyone knows exactly what's going on, and then it's like, right, what can I do with this, straightforward musculoskeletal low back pain presentation that I've had for ages and I want to get rid of? There, as I say, there is absolutely loads, and you can, stop yourself having to get in pain and need to go and see anyone, can't you, by being sensible?
So one of the most frequently complained about issue with working from home or with screens that I've heard of is kind of pain behind your eyes. And a lot of people will instantly go, okay, it's a tension headache, or it's blue light, or I haven't been blinking enough. But I remember when we talked before that you explained really nicely the whole chain of reactions that happen because of incorrect posture. So maybe could you go through that for me?
Yeah, no problem at all. Yes, so just talking about posture, just to touch base on, just kind of have a little bit of a chat about that, to kind of just make sure, I guess, one of the other most common things that I see is kind of, I was talking about the impact on your neck, or like you can kind of, you're getting a tight neck, but also that referred pain that kind of can come like behind your eye. So, excuse me, as we mentioned, any new symptoms, go and see the doctor. But I'll tell you something that I do sort of see commonly is basically coming up really from that shoulder tension all the way up through that musculoskeletal chain. You're basically getting a lot of tightness through the muscles that run up the back of the neck, and then over basically like fascia that comes across the top of your head, and it just gets really sort of tight and constricted, and you get that whole headache kind of wash all the way over. But actually your C2 vertebrae can refer pain to the back of the eye. So you've just got, as I mentioned, you've just got these few joints that are kind of literally just doing all of the work and just getting really uncomfortable. And then when it kind of push comes to shove and everything literally sort of constricts right in, you've got that C2 coming and referring that pain right to the back of the eye, and it can just be so uncomfortable. And literally you have to just then start to unwind that whole chain. So I do a lot of work with patients, getting rid of kind of like jaw tension, just getting them into kind of new habits, getting them a little bit more self-aware of, exactly sort of how they're using their body and that kind of thing, and just kind of getting them to relax, talking about all that abdominal strength and stuff. But then, there are just these kind of referred pain pathways, and that all that biomechanics of that whole kind of like musculoskeletal chain tension build up. But it's just, I just see it more and more commonly.
So we've talked a lot about, the physiological reasons, as well as sometimes it could be stress, right? That leads to different kinds of pains for us when we work from home. So can you give our listeners or viewers your 3 actionable pieces of advice so that we can feel better straight away working from home?
Yeah, no problem. So, so the first thing is, I'm going to go a little bit wider on this because I've got your listeners here. So not these will really help with the working from home, but they're just kind of general rules as well. So the first thing is really, in the first instance, to listen to your body and listen to the clues that your body is giving you. So, as I said, if there's kind of like things that are new, things that are getting worse, things that you haven't had before, you need to get that information and do something with it. And so the do something with it is go and see a GP. But day to day, you need to listen to your body, and you need to be thinking, just become a little bit more aware of it. So, am I clenching my jaw? Have I become like this? Do I need to get up and take a break? And it's just getting more in tune with your body. And patients often ask me, how do I do that? And it does have to be a conscious thing to begin with, and it's a bit kind of contrived, but sometimes you do have to have excuse me, like a reminder, on your phone, or it might be part of, like, if you do like the miracle morning or something like that, just going on, doing a bit of meditation, going on to something. There's loads of apps, but like the Headspace app or something of that type, which does like a really good body scan, where you're just becoming a bit more aware of your physical self. And I guess that comes on to my next point, is try not to exploit your body, which can sound like quite a strong word, but people do think of their bodies as just this kind of machine almost, and not even part of them, that they can just kind of do whatever they like with. And then it's only when it breaks that they're like, oh no, that's really irritating, and kind of do something about it. And then you're into that situation where you're off to the doctor, and they're busy and you're busy and you're in pain, and it's all just is not a great situation to be in. So it's exactly what you were talking about earlier, about just kind of prevention rather than cure. So, and the way to do that is just kind of just not take your body for granted, and try not to exploit it. And the flip side of that is, the third thing is about nurturing your body, and that does go hand in hand with nurturing your mind and your mental health as well. But just putting stuff into your body, so really looking after your body, and it is a mental shift, because I see a lot of I treat quite a few athletes, sort of like professional athletes, semi-professional athletes, who they may be very in tune with nutrition, they may be very in tune with things, but they're still just looking at it as a part of the function, if you like, of their bodies, and they're still looking at it as what I can get out of my body, in a very kind of black and white way. And then they kind of reach a point, and it's like, okay, where can I go from here, because I've used all my resources. And actually, sometimes you have to go a little bit further for your body than just fulfilling its needs. Sometimes you need to literally just kind of be really kind to your body and nurturing your body. And it's a mental shift, and that's reflected in, so whether you're doing a lot of training, and rather than sort of pushing yourself right to the limits, and you're in pain, you're really listening to your body, and then you're thinking, right, how can I really give my body extra, instead of just kind of keeping it just like head above water. So it is a mental shift. In the old days, you used to see a lot of people, no pain, no gain, and all that kind of exercise and stuff. And that really isn't the way to actually, ironically, get really good results and long-term results. You're just going to get quick results like that, and likelihood you're going to get injured. So it's just taking, I would say, a more mindful approach to your health, really. So I hope they're not too sort of general.
No, and I think
they are super important.
And I think what we need to remember, as with when I talk to people about nutrition, you need to listen to the cues that your body is sending you, because our bodies are very intelligent, right? If your stomach is grumbling, it's sending you a cue that you're hungry. If your lips feel dry, if your mouth feels dry, probably you're a bit dehydrated. And in the same way, we seem to have got very good at ignoring pain. I don't know why. I think that is probably the first inbuilt defense mechanism we have, even as babies, right? If there's pain, babies cry. And as adults, we are prioritizing productivity or other things over really being aware, okay, wait, this feels painful. Maybe I should stop and think about what's causing it. So I think I absolutely agree with the fact that we need to be more connected with ourselves and just stop ignoring the pain. Pain is there to tell you something.
Yeah, that really sort of encapsulates everything that I think we've been talking about today. I think don't ignore it, and there are things you can do about it. So
and I guess today's episode has been a little bit different to my normal ones because it's not as focused on nutrition, but coming back to food, which is partly why I'm so into nutrition. The final question I always ask my guests is, what is the one food that takes you to your happy place every time?
I think it's foods that bring back happy memories, isn't it? So for me, it's actually just really simple, stewed apples with cloves. And it's just one of those, it's a family taste, I suppose, that I remember my grandmother always used to stew her apples. She used to have cloves in there, and it's such a perfumey kind of it's a really specific taste, isn't it? And my father used to do the same, and I do now. And you just it's these kinds of whispers of memories, isn't it, with food sometimes? So that's mine.
And that's it for this episode of Neighbourhood Nutritionist. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope you've really enjoyed it and learned something you can take away with you today. If you could take a second to share this episode with one person you think will love it, that would be absolutely amazing. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening now. See you soon!